Thank you for coming to my poster. My name is Emilie Josephs, and this work was done with Haoyan Zhao and Talia Kunkel. As we behave in the world, we experience space at a variety of different scales. Vision science research is supported by large image databases, and to date, such databases exist for close-scale images of objects and far-scale images of scenes. However, no such databases exist for space at the reachable scale. And this is in spite of the fact that such reachable environments are incredibly important for everyday behavior. Here, we present a novel database of reachable scale images in an attempt to fix this gap. To create this database, we first needed to identify the images that we wanted to include. So we operationalized the concept of reach spaces and defined these as environments at a reachable scale which consists of surfaces and objects that enable tasks which we perform with our hands. And some common examples are the places where we work or the places where we cook. Next, we needed to identify a broad variety of reach spaces, and this was a challenge because there were no pre-existing lists of reachable environments. We generated these by finding lists of hobbies, professions, and chores, and from these deriving the reach spaces that would support them. Next, we divided them into categories, and we quickly realized that this was not trivial. Should you refer to a reach space based on the action that is performed there, or on the room that it is in? We eventually settled on a 4-part taxonomy, whereby a given reach space would be defined by the setting that it is part of, that is the broader environment type, the room that it is in, the surface supporting the actionable objects, and the action that is performed there. So you might have a home, office, desk typing, office park, office, desk typing, or university lecture hall desk typing. All images were collected from manual internet searches. So what does this database look like? Here, we go through some example stimuli, and the goal is to show you what reach spaces look like and to highlight some interesting divisions that we've discovered in building this database. Here are some spaces you might encounter in the home, spaces where you work, spaces where you wash your hands. And notice how reach space images present a strong first-person motor-relevant view, which is very different from what you get with single objects or large-scale scenes. Here are spaces which support the same behaviors, working or washing your hands, but are in a different setting. And notice how these images are very perceptually different than the ones on the screen before, and have very different semantic associations. So far, I've primarily shown images of reach spaces that consist of a horizontal surface populated with objects. However, there are different structures that are possible. For example, many reach spaces consist of a single, large, highly engineered object, with smaller subcomponents that can be interacted with. Other reach spaces have a primarily vertical support surface. And so far, we've noticed that these types of spaces tend to afford storage rather than active use. There are also many other reach spaces that have alternate interaction modes, for example, that require the use of tools, or that allow larger scale navigation in a broader environment. This is just a snapshot of the categories that we have, but already it gives an interesting sense of the variation of space at a reachable scale. While this database is still under construction, here are some numbers that describe it today. So far, we have 8,220 images, divided into 286 categories. Categories have a minimum of 10 images, but the median is 25. To get a sense of the broad variability of the kinds of environments sampled in this database, I encourage you to take a look at the poster, where I've quantified the frequency of each label under the different levels of the taxonomy that I've introduced above: settings, rooms, support surfaces, and actions. Looking at the top 5 from each of these, we can see that our database has primarily sampled images from the home, workshops, restaurants, or the outdoors, images that are in rooms such as kitchens, dining areas, hobby spaces, and stores, where the support surface is tables, counters, shelves, or desks, and where the actions that are afforded are shopping, storing, eating, and playing. There are many challenges that we are facing in building this. The biggest is that many professional reach spaces are simply not commonly captured in photos. For example, many restaurants have hostess stations, but I haven't been able to find a single one online so far. We've also found that automating the image searches has been very difficult, in large part because reach spaces are have very low prevalence in any given web search, and that they lack a generally accepted category label. Finally, as you can see from these images of tea drinking across the world, a given activity can look very different depending on the cultural context. To date, the reach space primarily reflects a Western perspective, but we're looking for ways to increase variability in this domain. We hope that by making this database freely accessible to researchers, we can kickstart work in the perception of reachable environments. Where we hope to take this next is to examine and discover what dimensions capture the variability in reach spaces. However, there are lots of important questions to be asked about how reach spaces are represented in the brain, and whether training image models and computer vision models on reach spaces can provide a better fit to brain data. We expect to have this database released in spring of 2021, but in the meantime, please feel free to reach out and ask questions. Thank you.